we're back. So last time we were here, we did some mathing and some figuring out, and we got the first beam in here in the basement. It was quite a large one. We had 5 pieces of lumber that we had to put together to get our required strength, and then of course we put some posts underneath it to so it didn't fall in. So that was a good job, us. The very last thing we did was we put a pocket into the foundation wall, so those beams had something to rest on. Now what we have to focus on is putting a first floor in here. So this task 3 is all about engineering and modeling the first floor in your house. So we're going to fill in this chart similar to how we did in this chart above. And we are going to figure out what size joists and all the good stuff about that. Before we do any of that, we need something to put our floor joists on. We can't just set them directly on this concrete. That would be a lot of work and a lot of fasting that we just don't want to do. So we use something called a sill plate, and the sill goes along the edge of all the foundations, and then that makes an easy connection between your floor joists and the foundation. So I have prepared one earlier. Ta-da! It says so right there. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this shape and we're going to run it all the way around the edge. So I'm going to just hit the M key to get the move command, and it's going to run all the way around the edge. Now, if you remember when we drew the outline of this house, we made a couple of copies. And that's what we're going to take advantage of right now. So I'm going to go find my other copies. Yours could be behind or in front, wherever you put them. You should know. And I'm going to put this over on my other copy that I made right there. So it is aligned on the left edge with this shape. Now we're going to use the follow me tool. So make sure you have it selected, which is under the push pull tool, and ready to go. So again, the way we're going to do this, we already have this one not as a group. It's in an empty shape, so we can use that. We are going to right click on this, explode it, and now these lines are not a group, but they are all highlighted. We can simply click our tool and click and whammo. Now, this one looks a little different because it's gray, and that just means, well, it's a long story, but if you triple click and then right click, you can reverse the faces. Sketchup uses different shading for different faces, whether it's the front or the back, and apparently it extruded and gave me the back face, so we can just flip that around. Anyways, there we are. We have our sill plate. In real life, of course, this would be multiple pieces cut up and installed, but for us, it's real quick and slick. So we want to make this a group so we can't screw it up easily. We're going to triple click, and then we're going to make a group, and then we're going to put it back on our foundation. So with the move tool, you have to choose somewhere that's going to make sense. I'm going to choose the bottom corner over here, zoom out, and simply bring it right over there. Okay, and now that lines up with all the edges. And there is your sill plate. Congratulations. Give yourself a round of applause, pat on the back, etc., etc. Take a musical break because I've just spotted an issue we're going to have to fix. Well, I mean, changing it now is a lot easier than were this a real actual thing. Here's the issue we're going to have. Our floor joists will sit on this newly minted sill plate, and they, of course, will go from the front of the house to this beam, and likely another floor joist will carry on from there. Unfortunately, currently, the top of this beam is not at the same height as our sill plate, so we should fix that. It's going to be relatively simple to do. What we're going to do, I'll give you an overview here. We are going to lift that beam up. We will have to lift then these posts up as well, and then that pocket that we made in the foundation, we're just going to have to pull the bottom up to meet it, and everything should be hunky-dory. Record time. Here we go. Let's pick all of the beams. Now, you may have you may have been playing around a bit and figured out there's a couple ways to select things. Number 1, you can click on something, and that's great. And if you want to click on something else, you can press and hold the shift, and you'll see beside the mouse that plus or minus comes on and off, and you can click something else. The reason it's plus or minus is that if you click something out, the same thing again, it will unselect it. The other option you have is to actually press and hold Control, and you'll notice it's only the plus. So no matter how many times you click on the same thing, you can't unselect it. The other way you can do it is by using something called a selection window, which is left-clicking and dragging a window, and that will select it. There are 2 different ways to do it, similar to many other programs. If you start in the top left and drag to the bottom right, you will get a window that only selects things that are fully encapsulated by that window. On the other hand, in a situation like this, what I'm going to do, I don't want to have to click a bunch of times to select all these. I'm going to use a selection window up and to the right, and you'll see that that window is now dashed, and anything that is partially touched by that window will be selected. So again, if I went top left down to the right, it won't select anything here because there's nothing in the selection window that is fully selected. However, if I come from the bottom up, it will select that. Of course, if you go from the bottom up and you just touch the foundation, it's also going to select that. So I'm doing that. There we go. We have those beams. Now I'm going to hold Control and I'm going to select that post and that post and that post. So I've got everything that I want to move selected currently. And what I'm going to do is make everything flush from the top of this beam to the top of the sill. In order to do that, we have to think about what we're going to do. I'm going to select this beam in this top corner and then start moving in the blue axis, hold Shift, and then click somewhere on this face. Here we go. So M for move, click once, start moving it up, and you'll see that it says there it's moving on the blue axis, and that's definitely where I want to move it. So I'm going to hold Shift, and now it can only move in the blue axis. And you notice anytime I click anywhere over here or have my mouse over there, it's locked to where that's going to be. And that is indeed where I want to click again. And now that is set. Okay, so that's there. I'm going to fix two things because I don't like what I'm seeing here. Number one, I'm going to go in and edit this foundation pocket. And you'll notice that there's this weird gap here. I don't like that. So I'm going to click, I'm going to click the push-pull tool, which is hidden behind the follow me tool. Alternatively, you can just press P, and I'm going to highlight the face. You can't see that it's highlighted, but trust me, it is. You'll see if I move over, it's going to select the top. So I'm going to select this face, push it back, and you'll notice that there it is. And I'm going to click on the inside face of the sill. And now, if we look real close, you'll notice that that pocket has moved, which is great. And then, of course, because we moved everything up, I'm going to click this face and move it upwards. I only want to go, of course, to the bottom. So I'm going to rotate around till I can see the bottom, click somewhere there, and that is that. The other thing we should do probably is do the same thing to the other side. So here we are. I'm going to hit P to get that tool, click somewhere here, and move it back to this face. That did not work out. Let's do that one more time. Click, go there, and then there you go. It has to recognize that you're going to click on that face. That looks wonderful. And now I'm going to click on this bottom face and move it up to there. So that's wonderful. However, now I have to move all these things. So I'm going to click out of that group. And again, I'm going to use the selection tool to get all those guys. And I'm going to move all of them. So press M, click on that. Make sure I'm going in the right axis. Hold Shift and click under there. So that's making a nice connection. And now, of course, I have to make it longer. So I'm going to come around this side. And these are components again. So whatever you do to one, it will do to all of them. I'm going to double click on one of them. So now I'm editing it. Hit P and pull that across to the edge there. And that is it. You can click anywhere to get out of that. And now our beam looks like where I thought we were starting. Yay. All right. This is where now we have to actually figure out what size our floor joists are. We've started from the ground up. We got this beam in based on a whole bunch of things. And now we have to figure out what size floor joists we need for this particular situation. And yours is going to be different, but I'll show you the way this one works out. This is talking about the first floor and a different table. We're going to use table A1, and if you click on that, it should take you to the table. And it looks similar to the other one, but there's a couple different sections, and everything is based on 3 options, which we're going to go through right now. So you're given that it's SPF, and the rest of these you have to figure out. And of course, all these things are here. I'm going to make up my specification number, which I'm going to say is 55, which is the biggest one. So if you have your design that is, and your number is 55, congratulations, we're going to do the math for you. The first thing you're going to do is figure out which grade you're using, which can be different from the beam that we did earlier. So I'm going to pull up my calculator here, and I'm going to take 55, and I think it says divide it by 19. So I will do that. Divide it by 19 equals 2.89. So I'm going to write that down somewhere so I don't forget. Right, I don't know, it doesn't matter here. 2.89. That's not a measurement, that's just my number. And here we go, 2.89. This says that my lumber grade is here. I am in the select structural group. So I'm going to type that in. Select structural. And now this other one is about bracing. Now, the bracing changes, and there's a couple different ways we can do it, and they're all sitting over here waiting for you, which is you have this cross bracing, which is called, this bracing. There's strapping, which is down here, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then there's a situation where you will use both of these at once. So let's find out what I am dealing with. My number is the same, so it puts me in here, which is strapping and bridging. And I don't want to type, so I'm just going to copy paste. Fantastic. It's centered, but who cares? Finally, we got to figure out what joist spacing, how far apart all the pieces of wood are. And it turns out it's the same thing divided by 19. So the spacing for me is 305 millimeters, which is something in imperial, but who knows? And here we are. The last thing that I do before we can figure out what joist size we have is figure out what the maximum span is. To determine that, it turns out we've already figured it out. It was the supported length from task 2 up here. So the supported length I don't have written down, which is awesome. So I'm going to make one up. Actually, I think it was 4.1 meters. I could be wrong, but that's what I'm going with. 4.1 meters. So I will type that in right here. 4.1 meters. And of course, you will have this written down already from something else. So we have all the things we need, and now we can go figure out what our joist size is. So let's look at our chart. Here we are. Moving from the left, we have SPF. That's great. Got to figure out which grade we are. I remember we were select structural, so we will be somewhere in this part of the chart at the top third. If we go back into here, this tells us we have strapping and bridging. So that puts us not in there, but rather over here on the right. So we're going to be now between JK and L. And our joist spacing is 305 millimeters, which puts us into this column. So we're in J. And finally, the number we're looking for that we're going to support the span that we have for these joists is 4.1 meters. So I'm going to live right here. That's it. So 4.1 is below this, which is great. I could do this one down here, but that's going to be overkill. So this is what I'm shooting for. And all you're going to do once you figure out which box you are, go all the way to the left, follow to the left. And this is our joist size, 38 by 184. And again, we have joist strapping and bridging and 305 spacing. So with all that in mind, I'm just going to Control C and go back in here and Control V. There's all my information to draw. So first, let's find the joist size. It is under the entity info. It's not that one. It is this one. It's a 2x8, 38 by 184. Just double check that I got that right. I did. And it has strapping and bridging. So we're going to use both these things. And you'll notice these are grouped and they say what they are. And this is 2x8, which is what that is. And the spacing is correct at 305. Please note that back here, there's the same joist. However, this strapping is 406 on center, and this one back here is 610. And there's also a spare C, so that's fun. So whichever spacing you are, that's how this is laid out. Choose the right one. So again, this is my joist. I'm going to use bridging, and I'm going to use strapping. So before, this is good that we figure this out. What I really want to focus on right now is that I have a 2x8 or a 38 by 184 floor joist, and I have to draw one more thing for the one more outline. You'll notice that there's these little guys sitting here. This is something called the rim joist, and our floor joists are going to sit on the sill plate that we talked about earlier. However, they need something on the end to fasten to, and that is, you got it, something called the rim joist. So this one here is 384. So I'm going to use that one. And again, I'm going to use the follow me tool, which you probably guessed, on the final outline that we have. So to make this easier, I'm going to bring this over here, put it there, and I'm going to grab my profile and move it. And again, I know where I'm going to put it. It's got to go on top of everything. So I'm going to grab the bottom, move it along, and plop it anywhere I want over here on that line. So one last time, get your follow me tool and then get rid of it, oddly, but you know, that's just how it works. This is a group in this case. It's not separate like it was for the sill plate. So I'm going to right click and explode. I'm going to right click the outline and explode, and everything's highlighted, but it's not a group. So everything's going to be peachy keen. Grab that tool, hit it once, and voila. Again, I've got the rear faces apparently. So triple click and reverse the faces and right click and make a group. So now I can grab this from this corner or whichever corner you like. And I'm going to dump it on top of here where it belongs, which is right lined up there. So now it's starting to come together. We have our sill plate, we have a rim joist that sits on that, and now we can start filling in our joists. So I'm going to grab that joist, which is this guy. Nope, it's this guy. That's good. I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to go install the first one. I think what I'm going to do is take it from this edge, and that'll become clear why in a minute, and pull it way over. I'm going to start in this corner, which is where we're going to start. And I'm going to select that anywhere here. It doesn't really matter. And what this does is set the right height. So the reason I've selected it there is I wanted to put it flush to the top here. I have my strapping down here, and I have my floor joist. So let's do this. First thing I'm going to do is double click on this, and I'm going to get the push pull tool by pressing P, and I'm going to pull this into this face. Now, when you have the push pull, it can only extrude in the direction that the face is going. So it's kind of like holding shift, but you don't have to. I'm going to go way over here and just click on that point because that is where I want it to end. And then I'm going to pull it to the middle of our beams. So grab it there, and well, you know what, just for our purposes, how about there? We're not going to draw the whole thing. We're only going to get a sense of this. I'm not going to continue that on. You know what? I'm lying. I am. I'm going to continue this all the way through, which you should too if you can. And we're going to click it there and close it. So there's our first joist, except I'm kind of lying. And I don't want this spacing that I've already got set. I actually want it 3/4 of an inch less. The reason for that is plywood. And if we continue with this spacing, when we got plywood on, it's going to end on the inside edge, which we'll show you in a minute. So you know what? I'm going to leave it as such for now. Let's go with that. So there it is. We have our correct spacing. I'm going to take this group of bridging, and I'm going to move it to the middle, which is going to be really difficult because I made this thing full length. I'm making my life difficult. So to do this, I'm just going to pull this back to the middle of my beam. There we go, close enough. And now what I can do when I get this bridging is I can grab this, and it will click to the middle. So if I move along here slowly, at some point it's going to say, hey, that's the midpoint. So that's where I want it. And now I'm going to go back and do this. Okay. So now we have the whole thing. So there's my floor joist with a bit of bridging. And now I need strapping, which also has to go to the middle. And strapping is just a flat piece of wood that gets connected to the bottom of the joists. So this is kind of in the middle of nowhere right now. And I'm going to install in a couple steps. Number one, I'm going to grab the bottom in the middle, and I'm going to move it this way to line it up left to right. And I can just go to the, oh, I can't go to the middle because I just made it bigger. So get into the green axis, hold shift, and I will line it up maybe with that point. Fantastic. And then I need to move it up. So I'm going to grab the top of this, go up in the blue axis, and then maybe click on, you don't have to be looking at, click on this face. And there it is. Oops, sorry about that. And finally, you can see that it's sticking out way over to there. So I'm going to move this now left to right. I'm going to get it going the right direction, hold shift, and I'll bring it, I suppose, sorry, let's get this again, shift to there. Okay, there's the beginning of my strapping. So this joist in real life would be split here, and you get a second one going. For our purposes, don't worry about it. And now I can simply, I'm going to make this longer because I'll need it all the way across. If I could select it, that is. And I'm going to pull it all the way over. Sorry if I'm making you dizzy. And let's go right to there. That's good. And then I can take my joist and my bridging, and I can move both of them at once. So what I will do again is click on this. So press M, click on that, start moving it. And of course, I want to keep that one there. So once I get going, I'll press Control, which will give me a copy. And I'm going to hold Shift to make sure I'm going in the right direction. And I can click on this face, which I don't, it is clicking on there, but I'm actually going to rotate around so I can see it, get in the red direction, hold Shift, and click on that face. So there it is. Now, if we haven't hit space or done anything, we can continue on our copy like we did when we made the outline. So what I'm going to do is hit Shift 8 to type in multiply by, and I'm going to type in, I don't know, 10. And there's that many, and I'm not there. So I'm going to now type in times 20, and I'm just making up numbers now. I need more, so I'll go 30 maybe. Oh, that's really good. So I don't want to play with what's in here. And similarly, for your situation, you don't need to draw them all in. I just want you to get a sense of what they would look like. So here we are. There's a whole bunch of joists and a whole bunch of strapping and a whole bunch of bridging for that section. That looks terrific. The next stage I want you to do, actually, you know what? That was a really good job, everybody. You've done great. I love the way your joists look. Take a break, and when we come back, we're going to install plywood and find out why this is all wrong and you have to change it, okay? We'll see you then. It's not that I lied per se, it's just that, well, sometimes when you make a mistake, you remember stuff more, and let's just proceed as though we're still buddies, okay? Here's what we got to do. We have to install plywood on this floor because I don't know about you, but I don't want to be walking around on this floor as it sits currently. So we're going to draw a sheet of plywood. Now, sheets of plywood, as you may or may not understand, are 8 feet long by 4 feet wide. So what we're going to do is draw a rectangle that is 8 feet long and 4 feet wide, and then we're going to push pull and extrude that up 3/4 of an inch. So R for rectangle. Let's start in this corner and pull it along here somewhere. And you'll see in the bottom corner, it's just guessing at a size. It says it's 5 foot by 2 foot 4 and 9/16, give or take. We want that to be 8 feet. So 8 feet, comma, 4 feet. And that should give us our piece of plywood. We're going to press P and we're going to pull that up 3/4 of an inch. So 0.75. And there we are. And hit space. And now we're all set. And I'm going to make this a group so I don't change it too easily. There we are. There's our sheet of plywood. You can see it lines up nicely on that edge, and it lines up nicely on the front edge, and everything is just really handy dandy. However, if I turn this around, what you're going to see is that the plywood is, well, it's really not doing so hot over here. So let's pretend that you're hanging out with your buddies and someone steps right here. Okay? In fact, hold on a second. I'm going to get a buddy. So I got a buddy. Here he is. And turns out this guy's name is, well, it's People. So anyways, his name is People. Let's get rid of you. And when my buddy comes over and he stands right, oops, sorry about that. When he stands right at the edge here, you'll notice that this plywood, which is 8 feet long, which is standard, isn't physically reaching the edge of this joist. So when he steps here, let's pretend this is a tile floor, all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of flex in this floor, and now your tiles crack or the mortar does. All kinds of bad stuff can happen. So this is generally not a good way to do it, to leave the joint between this and the next sheet of plywood unsupported. So it's currently not sitting on anything. If you were working here and your boss said, hey, could you please screw in this flooring? When you went to go put a screw through here, there's literally nothing to fasten to. So this is just bad news bears. And that is why using this spacing at 305 millimeters right off the bat is a problem. You can't ever do that. So what we want to do is make sure that this sheet of plywood, we can't order different size plywood. That just doesn't happen. And we don't also want to cut the very first one. So here's the solution. We're going to move this guy over until it's in the middle. Seems easy enough. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say goodbye to People. He's gone. And what we want to do is move all these joists over half the thickness of their, well, thickness. These guys are 1.5 inches thick, so we're going to move everything 3/4. And now what we have to do is select a whole bunch of stuff. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to select that guy. I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to grab all my bridging right now. So I'm going to hold Control, and I'm going to select all of that. That looks great. And then I'm going to turn myself around some more, get to where I can see everything, hold Control again. And I'm going to start right here and drag upwards. And I've got all those. And finally, that guy. So again, hold Control and click it one more time. And that is everything that I've drawn and that we drew a little bit oopsie. And that's going to work out for us. So, oh, you know what? I'm lying. I don't want to move this strapping. So I'm going to hold Shift, not Control, and unselect that. And there we go. Press Move, click anywhere at this point, because we know all we're doing is going in the red direction by 0.75 inches. Enter, and all is well. Let's take a look. Oh, I already got rid of people. If people was standing here, people would be much happier with this plywood now because it is fully supported on a floor joist, okay? So that's it. Last thing I'm going to do, this obviously didn't go so well. And you know what? For our purposes, just getting rid of it. Don't tell anybody, okay? In real life, you would just cut that down to size, but that's just too much drawing for now. So here we are. We have a piece of plywood that's great. Let's put another one down. And there's no real hard and fast rule for this assignment about how many you have to put down, but I would put down a couple sheets of plywood. So I'm going to take that over there and kabloomy. Of course, that's just 8 feet. We could have done that. And I want another one, so I'm going to hit Shift 8, which is multiplied by 2. And there's 2 more sheets of plywood. And oops, maybe times 3. Oh, I already pressed space. That's not going to work. Sorry about that. Oops. So I'm going to grab this, press M, and move it that way. Toggle Control, and just type in 8 feet. There it is. Now, the next thing we're going to do is kind of like, I'm going to select these 4. This is like Lego. So if you ever played with Lego, which you all know you did, what you will know is that if you built a wall and you put all the bricks on top of one another, this is the suckiest wall ever. Your cousins came over and destroyed it easily, and you got upset. It was a whole thing at Thanksgiving that everyone got upset about. So let's not do that. Let's make your wall/floor better. And of course, what you're going to do is stagger these joints. And I'm going to stagger them by half. So 48 inches or 4 feet. So I'll type in 4 feet, and now they're staggered. This, of course, is a slight issue we got going on over here. So I'm just going to delete it and draw a half sheet of plywood. So start in this corner, click there, and I'm going to go out to here, and I want it to be 4 feet by 4 feet. And then I will pull that up to 0.75 inches and make it a group. So now we have the beginnings of a plywood floor. And just because I can and it's easy, I'm going to select these and I'm going to move them in this direction. Oh dear, I didn't get all of them. Press space, do it again. I'm going to move them all in that direction. I'm going to press Control for a copy, and it's 4 plus 4, which is 8 feet. There's some plywood. Look at that. Isn't that wonderful? There it is. Now, let's just pause for a minute, and I want to talk about this in a bit of a more broad sense. So here's what's happened. Your parents are going away for the weekend, and they say, of course, hey, you don't have a party. And you're like, obviously I would never do that. Meanwhile, you're messaging all your buddies. So everyone comes over, and you're having a great time. And then your house falls apart, and everyone is sad. And we don't really want that. So here's what's happened. We have just used the building code, which I have summarized in some of these tables. And based on the design of our houses, we have engineered this whole thing so your house doesn't collapse for your party. And here's what happens. When you have all the people, you know what? Hold on. I'm going to find all of the people. So I found all the people. Turns out you got a lot of people at your party. There's a guy walking a dog. There's some kids over here. This guy's legs are going through your floor. It's a whole thing. Anyways, here's your party that you're having, and no one's falling through. And the reason is, when all these people are walking around and having a good time, their weight has to go somewhere. And at the end of the day, all of the weight on the roof that's not here, your furniture, everything goes down your walls through all this structure and into the bottom of your footing. And the way it does that is through all this stuff that we just drew. For instance, when all these people are standing on here, their weight is supported by plywood. So this guy's foot right here, the dog walker, he is, well, he's not really, his next step isn't going to be on a joist. It's going to be on this plywood. But his weight still gets transferred across this plywood to all these joists and the neighboring joists. That strapping, which is hiding in here and the bridging, that connects all these joists so that they have to bounce together and move together, and it strengthens them that this one can't bounce without this one as well. The strapping below means they can't move left to right, so they're solid in place. It makes it stronger still. Then, oh, we're in someone's legs. You got this rim joist here. This thing is here so that these don't tip left to right at the ends. Of course, all this weight from this people and this plywood and these floor joists has to go somewhere. It turns out it goes onto this beam. Now this beam, if I go through the floor, it has to be strong enough so that all this weight doesn't come through. So we engineered that and figured that out. And then, of course, all the way from all that stuff goes across these beams and down through these posts. All the weight comes down, and there would actually be a foundation that would be poured here as well, similar to these guys. So that is that. The next and final thing we're going to do, oh my gosh, is put a front wall on here so you can just close the door and not all these people will show up to your party, okay? So that's going to be the next one, is how do we draw a wall, what parts are there, and we'll go from there.